Hello everyone, this is County Historian Larry Tippin. We've been doing a series on our tiny towns and vanished villages of Putnam County. Now we're going to talk about the entire township that became part of Putnam County that no longer exists in and of itself, which is Mill Creek Township in southeastern Putnam County. It's now part of Jefferson Township, but it was once part of Morgan County, about 12 square miles, not a very large township. About 1859, the Citizen Petition, the county commissioners of Putnam County become part of Putnam County. The Mill Creek, the location in part of Morgan County, they had to go all the way to Martinsville to do their business in the county seat of that county, which is almost 30 miles away. They had to go across Mill Creek and then the White River, probably at Henderson Ford. And it's a very long, tiresome journey. And then here, Greencastle, the county seat of Putnam County, is only about 10 or 12 miles to the east or to the west for them. And they affiliated themselves more with their neighbors, Bell Union and Jefferson Township. So here's an article in the Greencastle Banner, December of 1859, in the County Commissioner's Court, where the citizens of Morgan County living west of Mill Creek again petitioned, implying that they have tried this before unsuccessfully, to have their territory annexed into Putnam County, but for some cause or other, the petition was not granted. And John Hanna represented the petitioners, and Addison Daggy represented those against them. Then we see March 29, 1860, Judge Cowgill, Putnam County, has decided that petition for some citizens of Morgan County become part of Mill Creek Township in Morgan County, become part of Putnam County. For all legal purposes, the interest is now successful, and the county commissioners of Putnam County acted legally in annexing the Mill Creek Township. And then again, you can stop or pause the presentation anytime if you want to read the entire article. And then, February of 1861, there's been a challenge to this. It's gone to the Indiana Supreme Court, who have decided that the Putnam County Commissioners acted illegally in annexing Mill Creek Township, which therefore reverts back to Morgan County, no longer part and parcel of Putnam. So they had to drag all the books from Martinsville to Greencastle. Now they got to take them back again. Probably did happen, but that's February. March, apologize for the quality. Some of the newspapers that have been scanned have bled through. By the way, you can read these newspapers at the Hoosier State Chronicles, which is online and free, very wonderful. You can go to any search engine you use, type in Hoosier State Chronicles, and you get these newspapers. Very wonderful. And then the state legislatures got involved in March of 1861, and then have basically said that they've sided with Putnam County now, and that the acts of Putnam County Commissioners were in fact legal, or they've made them legal, making Mill Creek part of Putnam County beyond dispute. So officially, in the 1861 session, the Indiana legislature, Mill Creek became part of Putnam County. Then, about in the early 1920s, it became apparent that Mill Creek was just too sparsely populated to continue to function, and they wanted to consolidate with Jefferson, which mostly for the purposes of the schools. I wanted to consolidate the schools. Now, back at this time, the schools were run by the township trustees, not like the consolidated schools we have now, where, for instance, in North Putnam, the 6 townships, the northern part of the county, are part of North Putnam schools. Each township trustee was responsible for the schools. There was a countywide superintendent of schools, who were elected by the township trustees and who set the curriculum and the books in consultation with the township trustees. But the township trustees were the ones that supported the schools financially, raised the taxes, hired the teachers, made sure there was enough coal for the heat, and they had the textbooks and so forth and so on. Mill Creek had 3 schools. So it was getting harder and harder for them to support the schools, and they wanted better schools for their children, so they wanted to consolidate with Jefferson. So here we see February 6, 1922, where this petition has been signed by 238 freeholders of Jefferson and Mill Creek townships to abolish Mill Creek Township, attach it to Jefferson, and then 96 signed a petition against that. And again, they're saying the project is for the consolidation of the school system. That's February 6, 1922. February 7th, they're getting ahead of themselves. This hasn't happened yet. The county commissioners are going to meet for 4 days in this week from the 6th to the 9th of February and do a lot of business. They're going to set the salaries. They're going to take care of the roads, many, many, many things. But one of those is they're going to hear that petition and decide whether to abolish Mill Creek Township. This has not yet happened at the time this paper was reported. They're saying that about 2 o'clock that Tuesday afternoon, the commissioners are going to meet and consider whether or not they're going to abolish Mill Creek Township. And the order would become effective at once. And they're saying that the trustee of Mill Creek Township will turn over the books to the trustee of Jefferson Township if the commissioners approve this. But also in that same newspaper, there's a petition backed by legal talent, basically petitioners for and petitioners against the consolidation of Mill Creek, or abolishment actually of Mill Creek, and consolidation into Jefferson. And again, they're talking about the school systems. That's the purpose of it. And then the responses sprang up all of a sudden. I'll explain why that happened. Then on February 9th, the commissioners closed their busy 4-day session where they did a lot of work. One of the things they did on that Tuesday, February 7th, the afternoon, was they did in fact hear the petition to abolish Mill Creek, and they granted it. So it would have been interesting to have been at that session to see the arguments raised for and against. Some of them probably very passionate, I'm quite certain. But the commissioners voted to abolish Mill Creek Township. That's not the end of it. A week later, there's a growing movement from those against the abolishment of Mill Creek Township, saying they now want a divorce, basically. They want to become Mill Creek Township again. And then basically what they're saying was some of these people that signed that petition for abolishment of Mill Creek Township said they thought they understood that to mean only for the consolidation of the schools. They didn't think it meant to abolish the township itself. They wanted to keep the township. They wanted to keep their identity. So they went and had I know there's a big movement to do that, but we don't see any follow-up. Apparently that never went anywhere, although there was apparently long lingering resentment against this action by some of the citizens of Mill Creek and losing their identity. But in perspective, I'll show you what they're doing here. I found the Township Trustee reports from January of 1922 for Mill Creek Township, showing the activity, I assume they mean for the year before. And then since it's so hard to read, I summarized the disbursements for all these funds. And you see that roughly 80% of all the disbursements of Mill Creek Township were for the school purposes. They also had dog fund, the road fund, and then the general township fund, pay the trustee salary, office supplies, and so forth. But 80% was for the school. So if they didn't have the school, what are they going to have left? They're only going to have a few $100s worth of these other activities, mostly for the roads and the dogs. Back then, the dog fund was you had a dog tax, maybe $2, whatever it was back then, on every dog. And then if livestock were injured, they presumed it was by dogs, although it could have been by other animals. And they used that money to reimburse the livestock owners. That's what the dog fund was. And then, put it in perspective, it's Jefferson Township, which is about twice as large in disbursements, and over 80% of their disbursements were for schools. And then again, you can pause this anytime if you want to read the whole thing. And then I've summarized those two together, put them in perspective. So you see Mill Creek and Jefferson. Further put this in perspective, I found the report for Madison Township, which is almost as sparsely populated as Mill Creek, only slightly larger in area, where their disbursements for schools in the previous year were about 7,000, roughly the same as Mill Creek. And then the others, of course, are more. The population of Mill Creek, 1920 census, was just over 400, and the population of Jefferson Township was about twice that. And this is the result of that, the consolidated school of Jefferson and, well, really former Mill Creek Township, consolidated just right after these actions were taken. This is from the schools, a publication called Schools in Your Hand. Very, very wonderful history of the schools by the retired teachers of Putnam County, published in 1978. And on page 69 of that, you see the picture of Jefferson Township Consolidated School. Some sources say it actually started a year sooner, 1924-25. But again, they were lingering feelings that Mill Creek wanted to keep its own identity. And the process really took quite a few years for Mill Creek to truly lose its identity. This is May of 1934 from the combined Putnam Times Roadkill News. The newspaper itself, by the way, is very fascinating. Talk about the history of this when I talk about Roadkill. But they're saying the 14 townships, including Mill Creek, and their aggregate expenditures for roads since 1900. Well, it's kind of makes sense a little bit because from 1900 to 1922, Mill Creek was separate, had its own separate expenditures, but this is implying that it's still a separate township, so to speak. There are 13 townships currently in Putnam County. There were 14 before Mill Creek was abolished. And then that fall, election time, they're showing Mill Creek as a precinct of Jefferson. Then, of course, you have Jefferson East, Jefferson West, Belle Union, and Mount Meridian, respectively. And then in 1937, there's this report from a State Department, they didn't say which State Department, which is inferring that Mill Creek is still a separate township, although it's been gone for 15 years at this point. Let's talk about some of the communities then in Mill Creek Township. The first one we'll talk about is Mount Washington, which is near the site, Pioneer Homestead of William Henley Parker. Southeast corner of the west half, northwest quarter of section 17, east of the Walnut Chapel Church, platted May of 1893. Lots 1 through 9 were reserved for Elizabeth Hill, Benjamin Parker. An addition was proposed, but the village did not thrive. It had its own post office for just a few years, from 1891 to 1894. At that time, the post office was discontinued. Then the mail would be sent to Belle Union. We see this in a publication called Postmasters, 1832 to 1970, a wonderful handwritten ledger or journal kept by the Post Office Department of all the post offices in, well, actually, the entire country. This is from the Putnam County section. And we see Mount Washington, and then where it dissolved, then Bell Union, as we just noted. According to Jordan Vaughn, if you're from that area, you know Jordan, William Henley Parker was the primary landowner of Mount Washington and nearby Bettersville. Talk about both of those in turn. This is 1879, the Mill Creek Township. You can see it's probably 3.5 miles wide. It's the widest point, but about 12 or 13 miles long north-south. And then in this section, we've highlighted this. This is a Walnut Chapel Church and Cemetery. Cemetery is still there. And then you see this road that goes east of it and then down, and then where it turns east. This is about where Mount Washington was. But interestingly, you don't see that now because when I-70 came through, that made that a dead-end road. So just north of the Walnut Chapel Cemetery, you see there's a dead-end road. But at the end, basically, of that dead-end road, where Mount Washington was. And then I'll show you Bettersville, about the approximate location of that. Talk about those two. I found Bettersville actually when I was doing research on Mount Washington. His newspaper from 1930 talks about those two communities. And Old Fort Red, we talked about that in a different presentation. We discussed Barnard, but here they're talking about Mount Washington. Says it takes a fairly old man or woman of Mill Creek Township at that to know about Mount Washington, located northeast of the site of Old Vettersville, a couple of miles, maybe not quite that much actually. William Henley Parker, as Jordan had told us, had a store there, and his brother Hugh, well-known Mill Creek Township citizen, was born in that place. I know it says there was no particular reason for this location to continue to exist, so it went west, so to speak, or basically just ceased to exist. And then also in that same article, they're talking about attorney John Alley owns an entire town, sometimes wished he did not, because this town site is quite the headache to him. The town known as Vettersville was in formerly Mill Creek Township, Putnam. Several miles south is the National Road, actually more than several miles. National Road being US 40, of course. Laid out probably 100 years ago, originally in Morgan County. They're saying how the taxpayers had difficulty crossing Mill Creek times to get to Martinsville, the county seat. We talked about that already. And there's a steam sawmill at Vettersville, which is built by the father of Isaac Radcliffe, and also a store and a toll bridge across Mill Creek. Some lots were sold and improved, but it really never got off the ground. But when this John Alley sells any property, he has to clear the title, which is quite a headache, partly because it was in Mill Creek, or partly because Mill Creek was in Morgan County, then Putnam, and so forth and so on, and because it was Vettersville, and then it wasn't Vettersville. And we see an action, a summary of the General Assembly in 1849, where they vacated the town of Vettersville, which was then in Morgan County. I never found where they established or accepted the establishment of Vettersville. This is where they vacated, all the way back in 1849, a long time ago. This is the Parker Bridge over Mill Creek. It's from the Putnam County Public Library collection. Picture taken by Hubert Clodfelder, recently deceased, well-noted historian, wonderful man. Talked about this bridge. It was in section 8 of what's now Jefferson Township, but based on the legal description, that would be up here, just north of Mount Washington. But we know now by all those legal descriptions, those newspapers we talked about and so forth, there's the location of Mount Washington, and more than likely the location of Vettersville. Let's talk about Broad Park, the other community that was in Morgan County. You can spell it Broad Park one word or two words if you prefer. Sections 5 and 6 of Old Mill Creek Township, about 2.5 miles northeast of Bell Union, when Broad Street and Parker decided they would put up a store, and then each they own land on the respective side of the road. Then a lot for schools also set aside. You can see the detailed area of Mill Creek Township. This is where Highway 75 now is, and US 40. You go south a few miles, you come to this area, which we've expanded. You can see as that road goes south, the school number 2 of Mill Creek Township. School number 1 was farther north, of course, and school number 3 was farther south. Those are the 3 schools in Mill Creek Township. If you want to see who they were, you can get the 1879 Atlas, which is available for sale, by the way, at Putnam County Museum. Wonderful reproduction of 1879 Atlas. And the schoolhouse number 2 that we've been talking about. You see Broad Street, Parkers. You also see alleys and some of the others in the area. Now, after they surveyed it, 1893, Broad Street and Parker decided to sell lots, but they needed a name. So they used parts of each of their names. Broad Street and Parker shortened it and called it Broad Park again. You can use one word or two, whatever you prefer. We don't need to argue about it. It's said that at one time Broad Park had about 10 houses, a school, a general store, blacksmith shop, barber shop, and a few other scattered businesses. And had a post office for a long time. This is just a partial list of postmasters beginning in 1892. Again, you can pause the recording if you want to stop and read them all. And then it continues on all the way to 1903, when the post office was discontinued and the mail was sent to Coatesville, which is almost 10 miles north in Hendricks County. And just see the announcement. This is fun. I like to look at the newspapers. Just talk about the new post office located at Broad Park, 4 miles southwest of Dawesville in 1892. And then I just like to look at the newspapers. It's 1893 Broad Park. Just a cross section of some of the people here. You see the Parkers. Broad Street's returned from the World's Fair in Chicago. Wheat looks good. They're going to have a huckster wagon, quite a good lot. Gravel's been put on the road. An interesting thing back in the day, if you wanted to get a break on your property taxes, maybe $5, $10, you could ask to maintain the road, section of a road. And basically what you did is you went down to the creek and got sand and gravel, more gravel than sand, and took it to the roads and filled the mud holes to help maintain the roads. That's how the roads were maintained back in the day. And I know a lot of people talked about how that was done, is that typically a farmer would use a horse-drawn wagon, and the wagon would have a loose board floor. The boards didn't down, but not nailed down. So they'd shovel the wagon full of that sand and gravel, drive the horse up to the road, and then separate those boards where the gravel would fall out, and then they'd level off with a shovel. Or maybe you'd have a horse with a drag bucket or some sort. That's what they do when they talk about the improvement of the roads. There's another article, 1894, Mill Creek Township in general. They talk about Broad Street, New Merchant here. Aunt Polly Way, been granted a pension. I'm sure they're talking about widow's pension from the Civil War. And then they're talking of a free gravel road through Mill Creek and Jefferson via Bell Union. Gravel road, of course, wouldn't be free, it'd be taxpayer supported. We saw where the township trustee was responsible for the roads, raised taxes to improve the roads. Improving roads, of course, was a big deal because you had to get your goods to market, travel. You had to have decent roads. In 1895, again, just having fun here, looking at some newspapers. The Broad Park store has been sold to Morgan County Group. School number 2 has closed. Noah Carpenter was a teacher. He deserves credit for the able manner in which he's taught these children. Good for him. Dave McInish, Shields, Sylvester Ellett as an agricultural implement store. Aunt Polly, Nozier, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, boarding, Pleasanthurst, so forth, so on. It's always fun to read about these people. This is a really nice photo, used with permission from Laura Lee Hamilton Forster, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, daughter of Betty Broadstreet Hamilton. This was their grandparents' place. Of John Cass Broadstreet, who went by his middle name. No date on the photo. This is the Broad Park. But he and his wife, Laura Bowman, were married in 1886, so we presume this photo was taken roughly 1900, give or take. Very nice photo, wonderful quality photo, beautiful house. And thank you for loaning that. And finally, we had the Broad Park School, student and faculty, 1911. Again, if you want to stop, record, pause the recording, you can read a little bit more, you can do so. Just very fun. See a cross section of the Vaughns, the mechanics, and so forth, Vermillions, all these people, Stringers. So that was a nice, I hope you enjoyed the history of Mill Creek Township. Again, we can only talk a little bit about it. You can't cover everything. You can talk to Jordan Vaughn, give you a lot more information. Clyde Stringer, some others.